Oh, perfect. I'm just operating on a new laptop, so I wasn't sure whether everyone could hear me loud and clear. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Okay, so let me share this first. Okay. So before we start our lecture, I just want to bring it to your attention. There has been a few announcements that I sent out today. Number one is your program assessment schedule has been released. I think it was early this week. So you now have assignment dates for this semester. I have shared the entire pass. So it helps you with all of your modules because all the modules are featuring there. So please just take into account all of your submission dates. Assignment 1 due on the 19th of March, assignment 2 due on the 9th of April. So the 19th of March doesn't give you too much of time, but we will be finished with content. So I have allocated it in the written document here, and I've just sort of slotted it in. So we will be done with at least, Learning Unit 3, Theme 1 and 2. I will be releasing the ICE task next week. So let's say more or less towards the end of next week, because I wanted to feature some portions of Learning Unit 2. So at least you have an ICE task for Learning Unit 1 as well as Learning Unit 2 to be due on the 13th of March. And then obviously concurrently with the ICE task, you are working on your assignment 1 as well. Your assignment 1 has been released. So I need you guys to go into student materials and go and check this. I have managed to see it, but I'm struggling to download it to Word. So I'm assuming I should be able to get it this evening or this evening. And then I'm going to try and upload it for you as well. So at least you have the assignment on hand and you can already start working on it. Some of the stuff that we would be covering in today's session as well as in last week's session is part of the assignment. So you can actually already get started on it. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to WhatsApp me. I was a bit slow on my emails this week because I was trying to change over laptops. So please WhatsApp me if I'm too slow to get back to you on email. But eventually I will. Okay, so PAS is updated. I've now provided you with a second version of your PACER. And then your YouTube is now up and running. So the first recording is already loaded. So you can check that if you missed the first session. And then all of the slides have already been loaded as well. So just shout if you need anything extra. But right now, this is where we're at. Okay. Just going to stop sharing that and then share the next portion, which is our slides. Okay, someone has a question. Yes,
Good
Brett.
evening, Larissa. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Brett?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
Just a quick one. I just wanted to find out assignment 1, where can we find it?
Okay, so it's under student materials. You would have to go into like your shared folder. You probably would get it with your login and then be able to find your first assignment. However, I will have it downloaded today because basically it's from SharePoint and we download it to Microsoft Word, but I'm having a bit of a struggle with permissions and stuff like that to get it downloaded to Word. Hopefully I'll get that sorted out tonight and then I can have it uploaded for all of you by tonight.
Brilliant. I see it's actually on your term 1 2025 module outline, and then there's also the assignment.
Yes.
So maybe what I can do, I can just maybe share it on the group or something as well, just to make it easier for everyone.
Absolutely. That's perfectly fine. I will also share it on announcements for people that are not active in the classes or on our WhatsApp group or whatever it is.
All right. Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. No problem. In the next session, what I'm going to do is I'll discuss portions of the... Yes. Hello.
Sorry, ma'am. Can we have that shared by the end of tonight, please? Because I'm having a little bit difficulty getting the right documents also. I'm not able to download anything actually.
Are you talking about your assignment? If you can have that tonight?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. No problem. I'll definitely have it for you by tonight. Sure. No problem. Okay, I think in the next session, what I'm going to do is I'll try and drop some hints when it comes to application and what we are looking at when the grading happens. It is when you do see the assignment, you will understand that you have like 2 case studies. And from the 2 case studies, you also have to use some of the theory that you would cover in your textbook or in our sessions, and use that to apply your answer. It's not always very easy. You don't know what the lecturer, the moderator is actually looking for. So I'm going to try and provide as much helpful tips as I can, especially in the next session. Once I have more time to sit down with the assignment and then break it down myself, then I can share a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to move over to our actual slides. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a recap from our Learning Unit 1, Theme 1. We're obviously going into Learning Unit 1, Theme 2 today, but I just want to do a little bit of recap that we didn't exactly cover in our first session. And one of it is we obviously went through a lot on strategic management, and sort of one of the renowned sort of scholar is Carl Mintzberg, and this one of his theories is design versus emergence. And basically what he does is he uses basically 2 contrasting perspectives on how you form a strategy. Number one is a deliberate or a design approach. So it's something that's very planned. It's like a top-down sort of approach where there's a plan, and the plan's basically used to formulate some sort of strategy that you have. And the second one is emergence, and emergence is something that organically happens over time. You can use either trial and error, you can use, you adapt to it. It's how you learn. So a good example of emergence is, like when you're a baby, you begin to write, and when you're a child, you begin to write or draw or hold a book or go to the toilet, you recognize letters, you recognize numbers, and that's where you emerge. So that's where emergence comes into play. And design is basically deliberate, where you physically sitting down and you're now trying to put together a strategy of how you get to a specific goal. So like, for instance, let's use an example of macro. Okay, so Walmart being the bigger sphere of it. You have multiple stores, and that's where they came up as emerging. So they emergent, and then they basically turned into a very organized organization, where they just became basically a giant, a retail giant. And that's where the approach became a lot more design and deliberate, but it started off as being emergence. Okay, so I hope that sort of like brings it into making sense, but that's how sort of strategy is then formulated. You have something that either you plan it and then eventually turns into something that's a lot more emergent, and it falls into space after time. Okay, and then the next one we have is something called room out. Okay, so from a room out perspective, it is it's basically looking at a different approach to strategy. So it's room out often focus. Is it just me or is it blur? Okay, now it's better. Room out often focuses on a good strategy and a bad strategy. So emphasizing how businesses think strategically and how they plan strategically. So some of the approaches that he uses, or the steps within his approach, is number one is where you diagnose the situation. What are some of the business problems that you're having, or problems within your organization? You need to understand what's the underlying challenges, where is your opportunity for you to grow the business or take the business into that strategic path. So from a supply chain perspective, it basically means you analyzing it through, your internal and external. We spoke last week on doing a SWOT analysis. So what's your strengths, weaknesses, what's your opportunities and threats from a internal as well as an external perspective. What's some of the factors that affects your supply chain? Is it customer demands? Is it the market environment that you're sitting in? Is it your competition in the market? Is there inefficiencies in your business operationally that is causing problems within your organization and affecting your supply chain? So when you diagnose the situation effectively, you can understand if there is areas for improvement, and you can develop some strategies that can address it, and you can maximize some of your opportunities based on that. The next one is you focusing on where your competitive advantage is, basically. So what Rumel talks about a lot is developing a clear as well as a compelling strategy where you'll be able to leverage where your strength as an organization sits in order for you to be to gain competitive advantage within the marketplace. So from a supply chain perspective, it means that you need to basically identify anything that makes you stand out, anything that's unique from a capability perspective, and what resources you need in order for you to optimize your supply chain. So it may be you invest in technology so that you have a more streamlined operational flow, faster to market. You can manufacture your product a lot quicker so you can get it out to your customer a lot quicker. Is that one of your strategies? Or is it you decide to go into a larger warehouse or a larger operational storage facility, which we're actually going to go through in Learning Unit 2. What sort of strategy from a warehousing side are you looking at? Maybe it means you are focusing more on getting the talent in that focuses on the different aspects of the supply chain, whether it's procurement or distribution or warehousing, inventory, stock. You need to get sufficient talent and people with skills? Or is it you just partner with strategic suppliers that can align with your strategy? So someone that's more efficient, someone that's flexible and agile, meaning that if you now run out of stock, they can quickly, help you. And it's not like a time frame where you're waiting, 6 to 8 weeks for a raw material or a semi-finished product. So you need to leverage a lot on what your strengths are so that you have the competitive advantage in the market. The next one is creation of actions. Okay, so it's basically aligning your actions or developing sort of actions that align with your strategy. You need to address what the root causes are for any sort of challenges that you're having. So very similar to where your diagnosis of the situation is happening, you now need to, how do you now deal with the situation? So from a supply chain perspective, it basically means that you are implementing different sort of initiatives within your business or within your supply chain that can support the objectives of your organization. So maybe it means you want to streamline processes by having something a little bit more automated in your business. And you want to create a better flow instead of having manual laborers, running a process flow. You want to invest in technology that can help you improve processes. Maybe it means collaboration either with your suppliers or with key customers of how you can actually better yourself. Or it means, you're enhancing your transportation or your distribution. People often forget that logistics and distribution form a major part of their business, whether it is importing a product from an international supplier, or whether it's distribution and delivery to your end customer locally. You have to be able to partner and collaborate with the supplier that has very similar business objectives that you have, and understands where your strategy is going, and they can align with it. If you have misalignment with your partners or your suppliers, unfortunately, all they're going to do is just pick up a product and deliver a product. There's nothing in between. There's no value add. There's no solution. There's nothing that they can do for you that can impact your cash flow positively, that can enhance your balance sheet positively. It's basically just a single level service. Okay, then we have your execution and adaptation. And here he basically highlights the role of having an effective execution, where you're translating your strategy into action, and you're also getting your desired outcomes in the process. So within supply chain management, successful execution basically requires clear communication from top down. You need someone from a strong leadership perspective that has sufficient KPIs in place that can now measure your actions. So everything from an organization and a business perspective needs to be measurable. You cannot put a strategy in place and then just wait for something to fall out the sky, unfortunately. You have to put a strategy in place and KPIs that's now driven by the strategies and the actions, and then measurement comes into place. So it's how do you now execute the action and then measure it and then adapt it if it doesn't work. So you now need, from an adaptation perspective, market changes, conditions change. I mean, when COVID hit, nobody would expect, but a lot of brick and mortar stores had basically closed down or stopped trade. And people shifted to e-commerce and online businesses. So in this case, distribution transport companies were flying because everybody now needed to deliver product to somebody's home majority of the time. So those sort of things were not anticipated. It wasn't something that, we would thought especially like within a South African atmosphere where people don't trust as easily as they do, that they would just be purchasing online, but they were forced to it. Now everybody runs Checker 60, everybody buys macro online, Take-A-Lot is huge. So people are shifting into a different direction. Market conditions have changed and businesses have to change with the market conditions. And then the last one is integration of activities. So you now need to be able to integrate different parts of the organization so you have a synergy within your organization, so you have the most amount of effectiveness from the strategy. So from a supply chain side, it means you need to have collaboration between all functions. Production needs to speak to procurement needs to speak to distribution needs to speak to customer services need to speak to finance to make sure that everything is paid and customers pay, etc. So there should never be, so what supply chain promotes a lot is collaboration between divisions or different silos. You should never be working in different silos in an organization. Everybody should be speaking to everybody. So in every business, it happens where they do end up working in silos, and sales hates accounts, and accounts hates customer service, and they just don't speak to each other. But collaboration means a lot. And I'll give you an example from my business perspective, or from a personal perspective. On a monthly basis, I bring everybody together from every single silo within my particular branch, bringing them together, and everybody says their piece. If customer services is having a problem with operations because operations is not delivering on time, So more customers are phoning customer service and now complaining. And customer services living and breathing in a negative environment of people phoning you only when they have a problem and not phoning you when you actually got your parcel on time. Unfortunately, it puts them in already a negative space. So it's now having two departments just completely at loggerheads with each other, and trying to create a common ground and a safe environment for them to now open up and speak about it. And that's collaboration. Whether it means that the sales team and the accounts team just never get on because a customer will bill X amount of money but doesn't pay on time. Account now decides that they haven't paid on time, I'm going to close the account or block the account or suspend it or whatever it is. And the sales team is now on the accounts team back. So it's, if they work together and they go as a unit to the customer and explain what the terms are, etc., maybe they'll get a different portion of the business from a customer, or a different version of why the customer hasn't paid. So basically what I'm trying to say is there needs to be synergy within all portions of the business. Everybody now needs to come together in order for the strategy to then be upheld within the organization. Okay. If there's any questions, I think just unmute yourself and ask me, because I cannot really see the chat box. I'm currently using one screen. Okay, but if you have any questions, just shout. And we did go through this the last time. So strategy versus supply chain management, and sort of the link between the two. And I don't want to go into any of the abbreviations because we did run it before, but I think where supply chain and strategy is very important for any organization is where the strategic objective that is set can help gain competitive advantage in any particular market or industry that the organization now features in. If you have a well-designed supply chain strategy that supports the business overall strategy, where they headed to from a direction perspective, where's what they need from an efficiency side, how do you now mitigate as much risk as possible? How do you deliver as much value to a customer? How do you get more innovation from a business or even promote sustainability? This is what now helps strategy as well as the supply chain develop within an organization. So supply chain then becomes a very critical component of the strategic management of an organization, and it should be well integrated into any sort of planning process within a business. As we go on later in the slides, you'll see the various sort of departments that feature within a supply chain, and you'll understand how important it is for all of those departments to now function as one unit. I mean, obviously everybody has their own KPI, but there should be one strategy that every unit is now following in order to reach the overall purpose or goal. Okay. Then we're going into the simple stuff, okay, which is definitions. And we're starting off with what is supply chain management. And this is basically, as it says here, coordination of all activities involved in whether you are sourcing a product, whether you are procuring an infrastructure or technology, whether you're converting something from a raw material into a finished good or a semi-finished into a finished good, and delivering it, so logistics management of your goods and services. It's planning, executing, and controlling the flow of materials, information, and also financing it as they move from suppliers to manufacturers to wholesalers to retailers, and then to customers finally. So the goal of supply chain management in totality is basically to optimize, one keyword. Okay, these are the keywords that you should always remember when you talk supply chain. So when you optimize the efficiency and the effectiveness of the supply chain so that you can meet your customers' demand while you keep costs down as much as possible and you maximize as much profit as possible. So that's the basic goal of supply chain management. Okay. Optimization, efficiency, effectiveness. That's the key words of any supply chain, and it'll be music to anyone's ears if they are part of a supply chain division in any organization. Okay, so let's talk about the evolution.
Larissa?
Yes.
Just a quick one.
Sure.
So I'm obviously in logistics at the moment, right? But
okay.
It's not directly logistics, but we utilize logistic companies. So I just wanted to pose a question to you because my brother works for Maersk. Now, we've been utilizing car carrier companies, right? So to anywhere carriers. So just to compare it to Aramex, for example, in our organization, in my business, I've taken it upon myself to get drivers to obviously transport vehicles. But when we can use economies of scale and utilize a carrier company, we'll obviously lower costs, right?
Correct.
But it then jeopardizes the delivery and the service. So what I wanted to ask you is that it's a bit of a dicey and touch and go one, because now on the one hand, your vehicles will be delivered in, let's say, turnaround is 7 working days. So you say to yourself, listen, does this work out from a service point of view? Because customers want their goods as soon as possible. Same like with Aramex. I know you guys were using third party or may still use third party. And it becomes very dicey. So do you say, okay, let me get 10 cars or 20 cars on a car carrier, for example, or do I utilize my own drivers and contracted drivers? Yes, I'm going to have costs at, let's say, 4,500 from Durban to Cape Town, but I can put it on a truck for the same amount, and then I'm doing maybe 10 vehicles or maybe 50 vehicles, and it's at a cheaper rate. In that instance now, it's a juggling act. So I just wanted to check with you, what is the best option,
solution.
because it's opportunity cost, so I just need to obviously, incorporate that in my business right now. And it's kind of hard because we want to streamline things. Yes, we want efficiency. Yes, we want service, but some things also got to kind of give, and with business, it's about time. It's about the customer now. They want this thing now, So it's a difficult one.
I think based on your question right now, it all boils down to what the customer wants. Like, when you're talking logistics specifically, you can send something from Durban to Cape Town today. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg to do it, but it's at the customer's 100%. Request, and the customer is now willing to pay the price for it. At the end of the day, you need to consider 2 options. Number one is, what is the customer willing to pay versus what they receive? And the second thing is, who's paying for it? Are you paying for it, or the customer is paying for it? So if the customer is paying 100%. For it and they want it here as in yesterday, then please, by all means, get a driver, let it cost 4.5.
It comes at a cost.
Absolutely. But then economies of scale, and that's what a lot of logistics companies push. It's because that's how they keep their costs down, is pushing economies of scale. You need to manage the customer's expectation. So by doing that, you sit down, hi, Mr. Customer, I can get your shipment here or your vehicle here in 7 days. It's going to cost you 1,000 Rand, or I can get it there in 48 hours or 24 hours, and it'll cost you 4,500 Rand. The decision is yours. So
put the ball in their court, essentially.
Exactly. And a lot of times when you speak logistics, it's not always the cost, and the optimization and the innovation and all the solutions and value adds for the business itself is what you can control, that's directly affecting your balance sheet or your P&L.
100%.
Now, at the end 100%. Of the day,
and I think that's the toughest challenge. That's the biggest thing right now, is the costs, because you need to obviously get costs down so that we're driving profit, but in the same breath, it's volumes. Now, you got to spend money to make money, and it's just it's extremely difficult.
No, it is, and I agree with you, but a lot, many times, you use the example of your brother being at Musk as well, and he'll probably also tell you the very same thing, is logistics is all about communication and
100%.
communication with your customer. You can
Yes.
change your P&L to look positive and, bring costs down if you have efficient communication. Take this for an example. If I'm
Yeah.
now telling you that I can get you your vehicle in, let's say 5 days, okay, and it's going to cost you 2,000 rand, and there was a major accident and Van Rienen's is closed and there's snowfalls, whatever, and me
Yeah.
as a customer, I'm not listening to you. You told me 5 days and it's going to cost me X amount. I'm expecting it there in 5 days. It's going to cost me
Yeah.
that. And it's now delivered on the 7th day. I now expect a discount from you. So now that's affecting your P&L. But if you're now
Yes.
delivering as per the expectation at the cost you're now telling me, at the end of the day, it's fine because your profit margin remains exactly the same. So
With you.
it's understanding from a customer side exactly what their requirements are and managing their expectation. That's basically all that logistics is. That's how you sell to your customers. You manage the expectation.
100%. And I think that's the key of sales, right? Is the
Absolutely.
customer service and the expectation and just managing that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks
Okay.
for that.
No
Super.
problem. No problem. Okay, so let's go into the evolution of supply chain. Okay, and this is sort of like where it started and where we sort of at, I would say not right now, but like probably like 2-3 years ago. So from an early development perspective, supply chains were very simple. Everything was local. You go down to the man down the street, you buy your raw materials, you bring it back, you manufacture it, goes into production, processing, etc. There's very limited coordination, very limited communication between various stages of either production or distribution. The focus was minimizing costs, maximizing efficiency. You're now pushing basically economies of scale. So you have individual functions like procurement, production, distribution, etc. Then we go into something that's a little bit more integrated and we have a little bit of expansion. And this sort of accelerated in like the late 20th century, where supply chains became a lot more complex. They were a little bit more interconnected, where businesses began to integrate their supply chain both vertically and horizontally. So where vertically and horizontally work, and I use this a lot with like, with commercial teams or sales teams, is if you look at sort of something from a horizontal perspective, so look at it from a straight line, so the horizon, you're looking at everyone that is your customer's customer, your customer suppliers, so looking at all of them as being interconnected and integrated. And then if you're looking at it from a vertical perspective, it's all the services you can then add into your customer. So for my organization, for instance, there's various different products. So it'll be sea freight, air freight, road freight, logistics, warehousing, last mile delivery, distribution, full truckloads, etc. So those are all the product services. So I'm now integrating all of that into the supply chain that I'm now offering to a specific customer. So it's now we're interconnecting everything. We're collaborating a lot with suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, etc., because the end goal is to meet a customer's demand. Then we have more of a revolution when it comes to an IT side. And this sort of happened in like the early 21st century, where we had a lot more technology that was introduced that can assist your supply chain to be a lot more optimized, like ERP systems, so enterprise resource planning systems, EDI. This is electronic data interchange. And then you have sort of stuff like SAP systems, APS systems, APIs, etc. So, where you're allowing a business to become a lot more digitized, they can automate some of their supply chain processes. Their visibility is improved. They're a lot more transparent. And then you have better communication across your supply chain when this happens. I'll share an example of how IT sort of transformed, especially when it comes to e-commerce. And I don't know if I shared it with this class last week, but a lot of times there's businesses that become an integrator between you and a customer. So you being a logistics provider and your customer, especially when they have an online platform. So whether they're using a platform like a Shopify, a Magento, or WooCommerce, or WordPress, whatever that platform is, they need to now integrate with a logistics provider, because there's no way that if, for instance, it's a business or an e-commerce website that is processing 100 orders a day, they cannot be manually now taking 100 people's, addresses and contact numbers and email addresses and contact names and now creating airwables. So how do we now automate it? And we get an integrator involved. And the integrator then immediately pulls all of this information that you as a customer would put in when you're creating your profile on the customer's website. All of this information is then pulled through and an airwable is automatically created. So you're now processing 100 airwables in 20 minutes as opposed to 100 airwables in, let's say, 8 hours. So it's IT has basically assisted not only businesses and organizations that are selling products, but businesses and organizations that are delivering the products. Okay. Then we go into globalization and outsourcing. And globalization basically came in, sort of like the early 21st century as well, where basically the supply chains of a lot of organizations had dispersed, meaning that they were now featured across multiple geographic regions. So from an international scope, people or organizations began sourcing materials from low-cost countries like China and Pakistan and India, especially, if we're talking fashion and textile, for instance. They were now leading to longer and more complex supply chains. So if you have to think of when we were in our early development phase, everything was localized, it was very simple. We would go down the street and purchase, let's say, a roll of fabric for 500 Rand. We are now purchasing a roll of fabric for 50 Rand from China, with our landed cost included. It's costing us 200 Rand. So in essence, we're saving $300 just on raw materials for a roll of fabric, which made sense to the supply chain. It was giving us a lot more optimization. It was allowing for better decision making to happen, and also it was pushing for businesses to be a lot more creative and take a lot more risks within their supply chain. Obviously, the timelines can be a little bit longer or a lot longer now, but it had forced organizations to plan a lot better, whereas previously, you could just like walk down if you ran out of something and pick it up and, you're done. Now you have to pre-plan. That's where a lot of people are now employed for. So we have job creation because of people having a lot more complex supply chains. Then we have digital transformation and Industry 4.0. And this is where everything that we love came into play. So Internet of Things, AI, so anything artificial intelligence. It basically, big data analytics. I mean, I'm a big data fan where I love to work with data because data tells you a story. It helps you to understand, where a business was, how they became, etc. And this helps a lot of businesses. So it became basically driving it into a completely new era. And Industry 4.0 basically allows your supply chain to be smarter, become more connected, become a lot more autonomous, so that you can use the data to predict a lot more. So, for instance, again, in my industry or my environment, you go through peaks and troughs. So with a peak, let's say, for instance, is in the logistics industry, it's Black Friday, it's Christmas. So let's say it's between the November and December period. You don't know how to plan for peak. So how do you now necessarily plan for peak? You use predictors and data. So you pull out data for the last 3 years. You understand that you grew year on year by 20% in terms of volume. You now prepare for peak based on the 20% increase in volume that you potentially will see. There's obviously some hits and misses, but you live and you learn. But more so, you are at least between 60 to 80% covered on where you need to be, and data helps you with that. Allows you to improve your decision-making skills. Your supply chain can be a lot more responsive because you can't exactly move more with less. You have to spend money to make money, basically. And then the last one is resilience and risk. So resilience and risk obviously came in when COVID hit, and we had a lot of natural disasters like the flooding that hit KZN and is still hitting KZN, and the looting that also happened. And then obviously COVID-19. So I think for 3 years in a row, there was just like bad circumstances that sort of hit. So it's now understanding that those sort of disruptions allows for businesses to be a lot more resilient and has to have some sort of risk management within the organization and within their supply chain. So businesses are, focused on building a lot more resilient supply chains and agile supply chains where they could make fast, quick thinking movement of where they could break some portion within their supply chain and move on, basically attach another chain to it. So they can withstand some of that disruptions. They can diversify from a sourcing perspective, maybe change some of their locations when it comes to production and warehousing. How do they now allocate a lot more robust risk mitigation strategies into their business? So I think this is something new that a lot of businesses had featured into their supply chain, and which previously they didn't see as required. So it just helps businesses to predict, or not sort of predict, but prepare for the future of what may happen. Okay. All right. And then we move on to some of the functions of supply chain. And I think we touched on just a little bit. So the functions of supply chain basically is very multifaceted. There's a wide range of different activities that help you or help an organization to optimize the flow of whether you have a good or a service, or it's data or information or anything from a supplier right down to a customer. And these are sort of the key functions that fit into the supply chain. Okay, so the first one is procurement. Okay, procurement basically wants cost cutting everywhere. So they're basically involved with finding the product or the raw material, the different components, the different services, whether it's a transport or a logistics provider, whatever it is that can support the business's operations. So the procurement function basically focuses on selecting your suppliers that fit in with the same sort of goal or objective that you as an organization have. They negotiate any sort of terms and different contracts. They manage the relationship with the suppliers, whether it's a monthly basis, having a KPI meeting to understand where the business or the supplier is sitting at in terms of the service that they've provided to the organization, and make sure that everything is done at the right cost. Okay. Then we have production planning, and also when you schedule your production. And basically this is making sure that you have an optimized production process. So whether you have enough capacity, whether it's from a raw material perspective or a staffing perspective, and then developing of the schedules for you to be able to meet that customer's demand. You need to do all of this with the mind of making sure that you're minimizing costs and you're maximizing as much efficiency as possible within the organization. So whether it means you are forecasting the demand, and you can use various tools for forecasting the demand, you're now developing what the production plan and the schedule is within the organization. And then you're managing your inventory level. So that's based on from a finished good perspective, so that you can balance out the supply and the demand of your product. Okay. Then we have inventory management. So inventory management is obviously making sure that you manage your flow of your goods and the material throughout the supply chain. So you make sure you have enough stock while you carry as little cost as possible. You don't want to be in a space where you have obsolete stock, or you have too much of stock or too little stock. So by forecasting demand as much as possible, you will be able to basically manage your inventory as best way you possibly can. Then we have logistics and transport. Okay. And this is quite critical functions in a supply chain, within an organization, because they're responsible for the physical movement and the distribution of the product from a supplier to a customer. So whether it's warehousing or transportation, whether it's managing the freight, whether it's route optimization, you're tracking a shipment properly or a last mile delivery, you just need to make sure that that product arrives on time, in the right quantity, and at the right condition, in the right condition. Then we have demand planning and forecasting. And with this, it's basically quite essential functions within the supply chain management, because you need to be able to predict what your customer's demand is for that specific product. You need to use a lot of historical data, different market trends. So obviously factor in whether your business or that product that you're selling within your business peaks in Easter or Mother's Day or Father's Day or Valentine's Day, whatever it is. So understanding when sort of the market trends, developing any sort of demand plans. You need to allocate resources properly. So this is what the demand planning and forecasting sort of department within a supply chain does. And then we have distribution and fulfillment, which is basically managing the distribution network and the order fulfillment process. So you want to be able to deliver the product to the customer as accurately as possible. And this means whether a customer places an order at your organization, it means processing the order, picking it, packing it, shipping it, managing any sort of DC that you have, any warehouse that you have, and any fulfillment centers that you may have, in order for you to meet up with that customer service and that delivery commitment that you have. Okay. So that's basically, in a nutshell, some of the functions of supply chain. There is other functions, whether it is a supplier relationship management, which goes hand in hand with procurement, or whether it's IT, information technology is a huge part of supply chain right now, and a big function, just when you talk about collaboration and communication, you want all the systems to basically speak together. So if you're using one ERP system or one SAP system, for instance, if anyone within the different functions of the supply chain puts in an order number, they are able to see the same information, and they're able to also read the same information. So that's where sort of information technology comes into play. Okay. And then we go into some of the concerns, and you'll probably hear a little bit of repetition as we go along, but it's basically creating the framework of supply chain, because as much as there's benefits, there's risks and concerns of a supply chain. So number one is you obviously need to understand a little bit about what some of the challenges are, because you want a supply chain that's as resilient as possible. You also want it to be as competitive as possible. So some of the concerns is supply chain disruptions, and we spoke a little bit about natural disasters, the pandemic, any sort of political issue. So Ukraine and Russia, for instance, has affected a lot of people's supply chain. Whether it means them importing from a raw material perspective or just from a logistics side. For you to get a logistics company to actually pick up a product from the Ukraine is almost impossible. Russia, maybe a certain part of it, but it becomes very difficult to actually process your supply chain or optimize your supply chain if there's political issues in a specific country. So you need to take note of that. Cyber attacks. So, you know, if there's any sort of attack on any sort of IT network that runs anything in the country. I remember, I don't know if it was a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, there was a cyber attack on the nervous system at the Durban port, where now all of the containers were stuck there and they couldn't now, you know, be cleared in time. There was no tracking for the actual container or the ship that's carrying the container. So all of this disrupts supply chains because you now are having to wait for material, you can't get your product through to a customer, you have customers complaining, you can only use the excuse of the port for so long until it stops being an issue. So it's now understanding what those disruptions are so you can, you know, be aware and facilitate it as one of your mitigating risks within your supply chain. Then we have globalization. So globalization basically also has led to a little bit of dispersion of some supply chains across, you know, basically the world. So when you're talking about like uncertainty, like especially when you're talking about tariffs, you know, regulatory changes, these sort of things, code violations, these are concerns that can basically disrupt someone's supply chain operations. You know, when you look at new sourcing strategies of when you're importing, you know, whether it's a finished good or a semi-finished or even a raw material, it's an increased cost for a lot of businesses because you're now operating in a global scale. You don't know what tariffs is going to hit you. You know, maybe you are declaring an item at an incorrect tariff code. When it comes here, you're paying extra duties and VAT. You know, to await a VOC, sort of voucher of credit, can take you 6 to 12 weeks, which can impact your business's cash flow at the end of the day. So it's understanding, you know, your business properly and understanding that globalization or basically using global trade can be a concern for a lot of people's supply chain, unless you've gotten the hang of all your tariff codes and the products that you're selling, etc. And also it forces a lot of organizations to be in tune with their logistics provider. So if you do have a clearing and forwarding company, for instance, they need to be on the same page as you to understand your business, understand your product, and to advise you of the best way possible of how to move your item at the most efficient and effective way. Then we have demand vulnerability. And this is basically when you have fluctuations in your customer's demand. Any sort of change in consumer behavior can create demand volatility and uncertainty within your supply chain. So today I love Coca-Cola, tomorrow I love Pepsi. That is a change in my decision. And I now go to my entire family and tell them, we are not drinking Coca-Cola anymore, we're only drinking Pepsi. What's going to happen to Coca-Cola sales? Obviously, we're a small little fraction of Coca-Cola. But I mean, if that news now travels, it can change a customer's demand, and therefore it can bring down the sales within the business or the organization itself. Then we have skills shortage, okay? And from a supply chain industry, basically some of the challenges are talent acquisition, retention, and skills shortage. So not a lot of people actually want to go into supply chain. I think, honestly speaking, even Varsity colleges only offered supply chain like the last 2 years. A lot of people don't think of supply chain as a career move. You know, as I spoke about supply chain and the different functions in it, you can go into procurement, into logistics. You can go into various different functions and develop that sort of skill that can make you really attractive to different organizations. You know, also a lot of times technology and the advancements as well it requires a skilled workforce to basically manage it. You need expertise in these areas, and we don't have a lot of skilled people in those particular areas. So it's how do you now work with digitally? How do you now, as a skilled person or an individual, now go with the times in terms of learning where that technology is now taking you? And then the last one is cybersecurity. I mean, I mentioned the whole, cyber attack, when we spoke about the port, but with increasing of digitization and interconnectedness of different supply chains, cybersecurity is a real threat to different supply chain operations. So cyber attacks target a lot of people's supply chain systems, their network. It can disrupt their whole operation. It can compromise some sensitive information that they may have, and it can lead to a lot of financial losses. And not only that, reputational damage, because you're not able to fulfill the needs of your customer because your operations at a standstill. So this is basically, in hindsight, some of the major concerns. There's obviously a lot more to this, but this is just some of the ones that I think is you can resonate with and you can understand a lot more clearly. Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm probably just going to do maybe my last slide, I think, or second last slide. But some of the benefits of supply chain management, and I ran over it quickly. So the first one is cost reduction, which we all love, as much cost as possible that we can reduce. And how do we optimize the supply chain processes to give us significant cost savings for any organization, whether it's streamlining your ops, whether it's eliminating your waste, reducing any sort of inefficiency within the business. You can lower your production, lower your transport, your delivery costs, how much of inventory you're holding, because remember, inventory is cash. So try and do a lot more, from an economies of scale perspective. So this is some of the benefits of supply chain. There's always ways of improving, and there's always ways of reducing costs. There can never be a chance where you'll say, okay, I've removed all the costs from a business, I'm now absolutely lean. There's always a way and a will where you can reduce cost. Then we have efficiency, and how can we then improve efficiency? So a lot of times supply chains basically enable businesses to improve their operational efficiency. So whether it's reducing their cycle times, increasing their productivity, whether it means, automating manual tasks, or just using technology to be better, how can we now become a lot more efficient? Then we have inventory optimization, to optimize as much inventory as possible, because you want to balance your supply and your demand, because you're going to be planning your inventory that will meet that demand. And then faster to market, how do you now streamline your product development, your production, and your distribution process? You want to collaborate all of those factors together with your suppliers, your manufacturers, your logistics partners, etc., so that you have a reduction in your lead time and you can bring your product faster to market to your customers. And then the last one is customer satisfaction. You want to increase this as much as possible, because these are the people that are actually paying for your product. So supply chain can play a very crucial role in making sure that your customer satisfaction is enhanced, because you're getting your product on time, the product quality is high, you respond to your customers' needs, you want to, making sure your product is accurate, those sort of things. You have better visibility, you've had orders from the time your customer places an order, it's right until the time it's delivered, you've got communication and transparency throughout. And I think that's basically your benefits. And then just from a structure perspective, and I'm not going to run too much into it, but it's sort of like what an organization's supply chain structure looks like. And it's a lot of the time, it's the keywords that we've been speaking about over the last two sessions, complexity. So a complex supply chain, when you have a lot of suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, customers, everybody involved, whether it's localized or it's, global, there's globalization involved. Efficiency, you want it as streamlined as possible with the interconnectedness from every department. Flexibility, you want to be able to change your supply chain in order for them to function in an agile market, and you need to be as resilient as possible, change with the different market demands. Resilience, you'd be able to withstand any sort of disruption, whether it's a natural disaster or a geopolitical event or any other supply chain disruption. Then you want to align with strategic objectives, understand where the business is going. The supply chain structure is with the overall business strategy and the objective. You need to do cost leadership. You need to do differentiation and focus. So part is 5 forces. Understand where your competitive advantage is. Collaboration and integration. So you need to assess where you're at from collaboration and integration with the different levels or different functions within your supply chain. So whether it's your supplier, your manufacturer, or your customer, are you collaborating? Are you integrated in their supply chain? Remember, integration in a supply chain of a customer basically makes you invincible. They cannot get rid of you because you are integrated within their supply chain. Then you have tech and innovation. To enhance any sort of visibility, efficiency, and agility within your business. And then the last one is performance and measurement. You want to understand where your KPIs are sitting. How do you then have an improvement process so that you can monitor and evaluate your supply chain over a period of time, whether it's inventory turnover or on-time delivery, lead times, or even cost to serve, whatever that may be, you need to identify what the areas of improvement are and have your related KPIs. Okay. I think that brings us to a closing of this session. So post this session, I'm going to, number 1, update these slides. Number 2, update this recording. And number 3, give you your assignment 1 so you can start working on it. If there's any questions, please let me know and we can take it from there. Otherwise, everybody have a really good evening and I will speak to you next week. Yes, Brett.
Thank you for that lovely session, Larissa. It was very insightful. I just wanted to check if it's possible to add me to the group or if I must take your number down, and then how does it work? I know you did give your number, I think, in the first session.
Yes, I did. Yes, it's also on under the announcements. So my number is there.
Brilliant.
I can just pop it into the chat box quickly, and you can just send me a quick WhatsApp if you don't mind. Okay.
Perfect. No, that's in order.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay.